If someone had told me that a canceled massage appointment would expose a betrayal worth over $2 million, I would have laughed and suggested they watch fewer crime documentaries. But as I sat in my car outside Serenity Springs Wellness Spa, staring at the text message that would unravel everything I thought I knew about trust and friendship, I had no idea that the financial monitoring system I'd installed months earlier was about to reveal fraud so elaborate it would make headlines across 3 states. What happened next didn't just save my investment portfolio. It exposed a web of deception that reached into the highest levels of Seattle's wellness industry. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Chen, and at 32, I thought I understood the difference between business partnerships and personal relationships. I'd built my fortune in financial technology, creating software that helps small businesses manage their cash flow and investment portfolios. The success had been sudden and overwhelming. 3 years ago, I was working 16-hour days in a cramped Seattle apartment, and now I owned a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay and managed investments worth over $50 million. The money had brought opportunities I'd never expected, including the chance to invest in businesses that aligned with my personal values rather than just my profit margins. That's how I became a silent partner in Serenity Springs Wellness Spa, a luxury facility in Bellevue that specialized in therapeutic massage and holistic healing services. The investment wasn't about maximizing returns. It was about supporting women entrepreneurs who were building something meaningful in the wellness industry. I discovered the spa through my own desperate need for stress relief during the final months of developing my software platform. Chronic tension, headaches, and shoulder pain from countless hours hunched over computer screens had led me to try every therapeutic option available in the greater Seattle area. Most facilities offered either medical massage that felt clinical and impersonal, or spa services that prioritized luxury over actual healing. Serenity Springs was different. It combined serious therapeutic expertise with an environment that made healing feel possible. The spa was owned and operated by Lisa Martinez, a licensed massage therapist who'd spent 15 years building her reputation through work with professional athletes and chronic pain patients. She'd opened Serenity Springs 2 years earlier, with the vision of creating a wellness center that addressed both physical therapy needs and the emotional stress that often underlied chronic pain conditions. The facility featured 7 treatment rooms, a meditation garden, and specialized equipment for everything from deep tissue massage to craniosacral therapy. What impressed me most about Lisa wasn't just her technical skill, though her ability to release tension that other therapists hadn't been able to touch was remarkable, but her business philosophy. She paid her staff above industry standards, offered comprehensive health benefits, and had created a workplace culture where therapists could focus on healing rather than sales quotas. The spa employed 12 massage therapists, 3 acupuncturists, and a support staff that included nutritionists and meditation instructors. When Lisa mentioned during one of my sessions that she was looking for investors to fund an expansion into a second location, I was immediately interested. The wellness industry was growing rapidly, driven by increasing awareness of the connection between stress and physical health, and Lisa had built exactly the kind of authentic business that could scale successfully without compromising its core values. More importantly, I believed in what she was trying to accomplish, creating spaces where healing could happen on multiple levels. The investment structure we developed was intentionally discreet. I provided $2.5 million in funding for the expansion, but my involvement was kept confidential to protect both Lisa's independence as an operator and my own privacy as someone who preferred to stay out of the public spotlight. Legally, I owned 40% of the expanded business, but operationally, Lisa maintained complete control over daily management, staffing decisions, and treatment protocols. The arrangement worked perfectly for over a year. Lisa's second location in downtown Seattle was even more successful than the original Bellevue facility, attracting clients from the tech industry who appreciated the combination of convenience and genuine therapeutic value. My investment was generating solid returns, but more importantly, I was watching someone I respected build something that improved people's lives in measurable ways. The expansion had also solved my own scheduling challenges. As a silent partner, I had standing appointments at both locations, allowing me to maintain the regular massage therapy that had become essential for managing the physical demands of running a tech company. Lisa herself provided most of my treatments, and over time our professional relationship had evolved into what I thought was genuine friendship. During my weekly sessions, Lisa would share updates about the business, challenges with staffing or equipment, and her dreams for future growth. She'd talk about her background growing up in a working-class family in Tacoma, her struggles to afford massage therapy school, and her determination to create opportunities for other therapists who shared her commitment to authentic healing. These conversations felt personal and honest, building the kind of trust that extended beyond our business relationship. I began attending staff appreciation events and holiday parties, always introduced as a supportive client rather than an investor. Lisa's team was impressive, skilled professionals who genuinely cared about their work and their clients' well-being. The culture she'd created was exactly what I'd hoped to support when I made the initial investment. Everyone seemed happy, motivated, and committed to the spa's mission of providing therapeutic healing in an environment that honored both science and compassion. My own relationship with massage therapy had deepened significantly during this period. Beyond the physical benefits, my weekly sessions with Lisa had become a form of meditation that helped me process the intense pressures of running a growing tech company. She had an intuitive understanding of how emotional stress manifested in physical tension, and her treatments addressed not just my symptoms but their underlying causes. The personal connection made the business investment feel even more meaningful. I wasn't just funding someone else's entrepreneurial dream. I was supporting a friend who was building something that enriched my own life and the lives of hundreds of other clients. When Lisa talked about her vision for opening additional locations or adding new services, I found myself genuinely excited about possibilities that went far beyond financial returns. That sense of partnership and shared purpose made what happened next feel like a betrayal of everything I thought we'd built together. The first warning sign came on a Tuesday morning in March, when I received a text message that would change everything I believed about trust and friendship. I was in my downtown office, reviewing quarterly reports from my software company, when my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa that stopped me cold. "Victoria, I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel your appointment today. A very high-profile celebrity client is in town unexpectedly and needs immediate treatment for an injury. I hope you understand. This could be huge for the spa's reputation. Can we reschedule for next week?" The message felt wrong in ways I couldn't immediately identify. Lisa had never canceled an appointment with me before, and she'd always been respectful of scheduling commitments with all her clients. More troubling was the emphasis on celebrity status and reputation benefits. Those weren't values that had ever driven her decision-making in the past. The Lisa I knew would have been more concerned about helping someone with an injury than about publicity opportunities. But what really bothered me was the assumption that I would automatically understand and accommodate the cancellation based on the celebrity status of the other client. It suggested a prioritization system that ranked clients by fame rather than need or loyalty, something that contradicted everything Lisa had told me about her business philosophy. I responded with professional understanding, telling her that rescheduling was fine and hoping the celebrity client's injury wasn't serious. But privately, I felt stung by the casual dismissal and the implication that my time was less valuable than someone with higher public visibility. I'd been supporting this business for over a year, both as an investor and a loyal client, but apparently that loyalty was conditional on my willingness to step aside for more glamorous opportunities. The incident might have remained a minor irritation if it hadn't happened again 3 weeks later. This time, Lisa canceled with just 2 hours' notice, explaining that the same celebrity had returned and specifically requested her services. The pattern was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like preference, as if I'd become a placeholder client who could be easily rescheduled whenever something better came along. When I asked casually about the celebrity during our next session, Lisa's response was evasive in ways that surprised me. She mentioned confidentiality agreements and professional discretion, but her tone suggested there was more to the story than simple privacy concerns. The woman who had always been open about her work and her clients was suddenly guarded about this particular relationship. Over the following months, the celebrity cancellations became increasingly frequent and increasingly disruptive to my schedule. Sometimes Lisa would cancel the day before, sometimes just hours ahead of our appointment time. Each cancellation was accompanied by apologies and explanations about emergency treatments and urgent scheduling conflicts, but the pattern was unmistakable. My standing appointments had become secondary to this mysterious celebrity client's unpredictable needs. What made the situation more frustrating was Lisa's apparent assumption that I should be excited about these disruptions because they reflected well on the spa's reputation. She would mention how having high-profile clients was bringing new attention to Serenity Springs, how celebrity endorsements could transform the business, how she was building relationships that could open doors to opportunities she'd never imagined. During one particularly irritating conversation, after she'd canceled my appointment for the 4th time in 6 weeks, Lisa actually suggested that I should feel good about contributing to the spa's success by being flexible with my scheduling. The implication was that my willingness to accommodate celebrity clients was a form of team spirit that supported our shared business goals. The patronizing tone was infuriating, especially since Lisa had no idea that my flexibility was supporting a business I partially owned. From her perspective, I was just a loyal client who should be grateful for the opportunity to make space for more important people. The disconnect between her gratitude for my understanding and my actual role in the business was becoming impossible to ignore. But the real wake-up call came when I started paying attention to other changes happening at both spa locations. During my visits, I began noticing new equipment that seemed expensive, renovations that looked costly, and staff additions that would require significant investment. When I asked Lisa about the improvements during one of our sessions, her explanations were vague and unconvincing. The new massage tables were described as donations from grateful clients. The renovation of the meditation garden was supposedly funded through a wellness grant that Lisa had applied for months earlier. The addition of 3 new therapists was explained as a response to increased demand, though she didn't mention where the money for their salaries and benefits was coming from. None of these explanations made sense from a business perspective. High-end massage equipment cost thousands of dollars per piece, renovation projects required substantial upfront investment, and expanding staff was a major financial commitment that would need careful planning and secured funding. If Lisa was making these investments from operational cash flow, the spa was generating far more revenue than the financial reports I received as a silent partner suggested. That's when I began to suspect that something was seriously wrong with the business I'd invested in, and the person I trusted to manage it. The discovery that changed everything happened on a Friday evening in late June. I'd been working late at my office, reviewing investment portfolios and preparing for a board meeting the following week, when I decided to drive by the downtown spa location to check on some renovations that Lisa had mentioned during our last conversation. It was nearly 9 o'clock, well past normal business hours, but I was curious about the progress and wanted to see the improvements that my investment was supposedly funding. What I found in the spa's parking lot shattered every assumption I'd made about Lisa's honesty and integrity. The building was lit up like a festival, with expensive cars filling every parking space, and a line of well-dressed people waiting outside the main entrance. Through the large windows, I could see that the facility had been transformed into an elegant cocktail party, complete with professional catering, live music, and what appeared to be a full bar setup. This wasn't a wellness facility providing therapeutic massage services. This was an exclusive social event being hosted in a space that I partially owned, using resources that should have been dedicated to legitimate business operations. The scale and expense of the party suggested months of planning and significant financial investment, money that should have been reflected in the business reports I received as a partner. I parked across the street and watched the event unfold, trying to understand what I was seeing. The guest list appeared to include Seattle's social elite, recognizable faces from the tech industry, entertainment figures, and what looked like local politicians and business leaders. Everyone was dressed for a high-end social function, not for massage therapy or wellness treatments. Lisa herself was visible through the windows, wearing an expensive evening dress and moving through the crowd with the confidence of someone hosting her own social triumph. She was greeting guests with the kind of animated enthusiasm I'd never seen during our professional interactions, laughing and networking with the ease of someone who belonged in these social circles. But what confused me most was the presence of people I recognized as clients from my own visits to the spa. Regular customers who came for weekly therapeutic sessions were mingling with the party guests, suggesting this wasn't just a one-time event, but part of some ongoing social program that I'd been completely unaware of. I sat in my car for over an hour, watching the party continue and trying to piece together what this meant for the business I'd invested in and the relationship I'd built with Lisa. The financial implications were staggering. Hosting events like this would require permits, insurance, catering costs, and potentially modifications to the facility that should have been discussed with all partners before implementation. More personally troubling was the realization that Lisa had been maintaining a completely different relationship with the spa and its clients than anything she'd shared with me. During our sessions, she portrayed herself as a dedicated therapeutic professional focused on healing and wellness. But the woman I was watching through those windows was operating as a social entrepreneur who understood how to leverage the spa's reputation for networking and status-building purposes. When I finally drove home that night, I felt a disorientation that was both professional and deeply personal. Either Lisa was running unauthorized social events using spa resources, or she was operating a side of the business that I'd been deliberately excluded from as a partner. Both possibilities suggested a level of deception that called into question everything I thought I knew about our business relationship and our personal friendship. The following week, I began conducting my own investigation into the spa's financial operations. As a silent partner, I had legal rights to review business records, but I'd never exercised those rights because I trusted Lisa's management and respected her operational independence. Now that trust felt naive, and I realized I needed to understand exactly how my investment was being used. What I discovered was worse than anything I'd imagined. The financial records revealed a pattern of expenses that had nothing to do with therapeutic massage or wellness services. There were payments to event planning companies, catering services, entertainment booking agencies, and social media marketing firms that specialized in luxury lifestyle promotion. The spa was apparently hosting regular exclusive events that generated revenue through membership fees, corporate sponsorships, and what appeared to be some form of social club dues. More disturbing were the payments to individuals who weren't listed as employees or contractors in any of the official business documentation. Large monthly transfers were going to people whose names I didn't recognize, for services that weren't described in any way that related to legitimate spa operations. The amounts were substantial. Tens of thousands of dollars per month that should have been reflected in either operational costs or profit distributions to partners. The most damaging discovery was a separate bank account that Lisa had opened in the spa's name but hadn't disclosed to me as a partner. This account was receiving deposits from sources that weren't reflected in the financial reports I'd been receiving, including what appeared to be payment for services that had nothing to do with massage therapy or wellness treatments. When I cross-referenced the dates of these mysterious deposits with my own canceled appointments, a pattern emerged that made my stomach turn. The celebrity cancellations hadn't been about accommodating a high-profile client's medical needs. They'd been about clearing my schedule so that Lisa could use my appointment slots for more profitable activities that she didn't want me to witness. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Lisa hadn't been protecting a celebrity client's privacy when she'd canceled my appointments. She'd been protecting her own secret business operations from scrutiny by the one person who had legal authority to question what was happening at the spa. Every cancellation had been a calculated move to keep me away during activities that would have exposed her unauthorized use of business resources. I spent the weekend reviewing every financial document, every business communication, and every contract related to my investment in Serenity Springs. The picture that emerged was of systematic fraud that had been ongoing for at least 8 months, possibly longer. Lisa had been using the spa's facilities, resources, and reputation to operate what appeared to be an exclusive social club that generated significant revenue without my knowledge or consent as a partner. The emotional betrayal was as devastating as the financial fraud. During our weekly sessions, Lisa had shared stories about her struggles to build the business, her gratitude for my investment, and her dreams of expanding therapeutic services to help more people. She'd portrayed herself as someone who shared my values about building meaningful businesses that served authentic purposes. But the evidence suggested that she'd been using our personal relationship and my trust to hide activities that directly contradicted everything she'd claimed to believe about wellness and therapeutic healing. Instead of building a sanctuary for healing, she'd been operating a social enterprise that commodified wellness for the entertainment of wealthy clients who could afford exclusive access. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Lisa had essentially created two different businesses operating in the same space: the legitimate spa that I'd invested in and believed I was supporting, and a secret social club that generated profits she wasn't sharing with her partners. She'd been living a double life, presenting herself to me as a dedicated therapeutic professional, while actually operating as a social entrepreneur who understood how to monetize relationships and status. By Monday morning, I'd made the decision to confront Lisa directly about what I'd discovered, but I also realized that I needed to be strategic about how I approached the situation. If Lisa had been sophisticated enough to hide this level of fraud for months, she would likely be prepared with explanations or deflections that could confuse the issues if I wasn't careful about documenting everything properly. I scheduled a massage appointment for that Tuesday, telling Lisa that I had some business questions I wanted to discuss during our session. My plan was to present the financial evidence I'd gathered and give her an opportunity to explain the discrepancies before deciding whether to involve law enforcement or pursue civil litigation. What I didn't expect was that Lisa was already several steps ahead of me, implementing a plan that would make our Tuesday appointment far more dramatic than either of us anticipated. The Tuesday that would reveal the full scope of Lisa's betrayal started with her usual professional warmth. She greeted me at the spa's reception area with the kind of genuine smile that had always made me feel welcomed and valued as a client. Her treatment room was prepared with the same attention to detail that had characterized our sessions for over 2 years: fresh linens, carefully adjusted lighting, and the subtle aromatherapy scents that helped create an atmosphere of calm and healing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But something felt different about Lisa's energy that day. Beneath her professional demeanor, I sensed an underlying tension that I'd never noticed before, as if she was preparing for something that required careful management. Her conversation was more animated than usual, filled with stories about the spa's recent success and her excitement about future expansion plans. "Victoria, I'm so glad you're here today," she said as I settled onto the massage table. "I've been wanting to talk with you about some amazing opportunities that have come up for Serenity Springs. We're getting attention from some incredibly influential people in the wellness industry, and I think we're positioned for the kind of growth that could transform everything." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, but I was no longer able to accept Lisa's presentations at face value. After discovering the undisclosed financial activities, every conversation felt layered with potential deception. Was she excited about legitimate business opportunities? Or was she celebrating the success of activities that she'd been hiding from me as a partner? "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, testing whether she would volunteer information about the social events and alternative revenue streams I discovered. Lisa's response was a masterclass in selective disclosure. She talked about partnerships with luxury hotels that wanted to offer spa services to their guests, corporate wellness contracts with major Seattle employers, and collaborations with medical practices that could refer chronic pain patients for therapeutic treatments. All of these opportunities sounded legitimate and aligned with the business model we'd originally discussed. But notably absent from her excited update was any mention of the exclusive social events, the mysterious revenue streams, or the expensive improvements that weren't reflected in the financial reports she'd been providing. She was either testing whether I'd discovered her secret activities, or she was genuinely compartmentalized enough to believe that her unauthorized business operations weren't relevant to our partnership conversation. Halfway through the massage session, Lisa's phone buzzed with what she described as an urgent call from a potential celebrity client who was in town for a film festival and needed immediate treatment for a performance-related injury. They're looking for a wellness partner for their upcoming tour, and if Serenity Springs becomes their preferred provider, we could be looking at contracts worth millions of dollars. The irony was unbearable. Lisa was talking about million-dollar opportunities while actively stealing from the person who'd already provided millions in legitimate investment. She was imagining future success while systematically undermining the partnership that had made her current success possible. But what disturbed me most was her assumption that I would be excited about these developments without understanding their true nature. Lisa was presenting the conversion of our therapeutic spa into a social networking venue as if it was a natural evolution that served our shared business goals. She seemed to genuinely believe that I would support the commodification of wellness services if it generated sufficient revenue. After the session ended, I scheduled another appointment for the following week, playing the role of the supportive client who was excited about the spa's growing reputation and celebrity connections. But privately, I was planning a confrontation that would force Lisa to account for every dollar of unauthorized spending and every decision that had been made without my consent as a partner. I'd invested in Serenity Springs because I believed in Lisa's vision of authentic therapeutic healing. Instead, I'd been funding the creation of an exclusive social club that used wellness as a marketing concept rather than a genuine mission. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about the corruption of values that I'd thought we shared. But I was about to discover that Lisa's deception was far more elaborate than unauthorized social events and hidden revenue streams. The exclusive celebrity client who'd been disrupting my appointments didn't exist, and the networking parties were just the visible surface of a fraud that reached into every aspect of the business I'd trusted her to manage. The following week, instead of keeping my scheduled appointment, I decided to conduct surveillance on the spa to understand exactly what was happening during the hours when I was supposedly being displaced by celebrity treatments. I positioned myself across the street from the downtown location with a clear view of the entrance and the main treatment areas visible through the large windows. What I observed that Tuesday afternoon revealed a level of deception that exceeded my worst suspicions. There was no celebrity client receiving urgent medical treatment. Instead, the spa was hosting what appeared to be a business meeting involving several people I didn't recognize, all dressed in expensive suits and carrying briefcases that suggested they were there for financial rather than therapeutic purposes. Lisa was presenting documents and leading discussions that looked nothing like massage therapy consultations. Through the windows, I could see charts and graphs being displayed on a large screen that had been set up in what was normally the meditation room. The entire facility had been converted into a conference space, with the massage tables pushed aside to make room for a boardroom-style meeting setup. The participants were taking notes, examining documents, and engaging in the kind of intense discussion that characterized high-stakes business negotiations. Lisa was clearly the central figure in whatever was being planned, presenting information and answering questions with the authority of someone who controlled significant resources and decision-making power. But the most shocking realization came when I recognized one of the meeting participants as James Morrison, a commercial real estate developer who specialized in acquiring and converting wellness businesses into more profitable entertainment venues. His presence suggested that Lisa wasn't just operating unauthorized social events. She was planning to fundamentally transform Serenity Springs into something that bore no resemblance to the therapeutic facility I'd invested in. I spent the next 3 hours documenting everything I could observe from my position across the street. Using my phone camera, I recorded the meeting participants, their vehicles, and any visible documents or presentations that might provide evidence of what was being planned. The level of activity and the professional nature of the gathering suggested that whatever Lisa was planning, it was far more sophisticated than simple financial fraud. When the meeting finally ended near 7 o'clock, I followed James Morrison's vehicle at a safe distance, hoping to gather additional information about his role in whatever scheme was being developed. His destination was a commercial real estate office in downtown Seattle, where he met with additional parties who appeared to be investors or legal advisors. The implications were becoming clear. Lisa wasn't just skimming money from spa operations or hosting unauthorized social events. She was actively planning to convert Serenity Springs into a different type of business entirely, potentially selling or restructuring the company in ways that would eliminate my ownership stake while maximizing her own profits from the transition. That night, I called my attorney and explained the situation. Patricia Kim was a corporate lawyer who specialized in partnership disputes and business fraud, and she understood immediately that I was dealing with a sophisticated scheme designed to steal my investment while leaving me with no legal recourse. Victoria, what you're describing sounds like systematic breach of fiduciary duty combined with potential conversion of partnership assets, Patricia said during our emergency consultation. If Lisa has been using spa resources for unauthorized business activities and is planning to restructure the company without your consent, we're looking at multiple felony charges in addition to civil liability. Patricia recommended that I gather additional evidence before confronting Lisa directly. If she was sophisticated enough to hide these activities for months, she was probably prepared with explanations or legal strategies that could complicate our ability to prove fraud. We needed documentation that would be admissible in court and evidence that would demonstrate the scope of her deception. Over the following 2 weeks, I conducted what amounted to a covert investigation of my own business partnership. Using my legal rights as a partner, I requested comprehensive financial records, vendor contracts, and operational documentation that Lisa was required to provide, but had been avoiding through various delays and excuses. The evidence I gathered was damning. Lisa had been operating Serenity Springs as essentially 2 different businesses: the legitimate therapeutic spa that generated the revenue reflected in partnership reports, and a secondary social club operation that generated additional income through membership fees, event hosting, and what appeared to be premium services that weren't disclosed to all partners. The financial fraud was extensive. Over 18 months, Lisa had diverted nearly $400,000 from spa operations into personal accounts and unauthorized business activities. She'd been paying herself management fees that weren't specified in our partnership agreement, using spa resources for personal expenses, and generating revenue through activities that should have been disclosed to all partners. But the most serious discovery was evidence that Lisa was planning to sell her majority ownership stake to James Morrison's development company, effectively transferring control of Serenity Springs to investors who planned to convert the facility into a high-end social club that bore no resemblance to the therapeutic business I'd invested in. The sale documents I found revealed that Lisa had been negotiating with Morrison for months, promising him operational control and development rights that would allow him to transform the spa into a profitable entertainment venue. She was planning to cash out her investment at a premium price, while leaving me as a minority partner in a business that no longer served any of the purposes I'd originally supported. The cruelest aspect of her scheme was that she'd been using our personal relationship and my trust to hide the planning process. During our weekly massage sessions, while I relaxed and shared my own business challenges and personal concerns, Lisa had been gathering information about my availability, my other investment priorities, and my general awareness of spa operations. She'd been studying me as much as she'd been treating me, learning how to time her deceptions to avoid detection, and how to frame her unauthorized activities in ways that would seem reasonable if I accidentally discovered them. Every conversation we'd had about business expansion and growth opportunities had been cover for planning that would ultimately exclude me from the benefits I'd invested to create. When Patricia Kim reviewed the evidence I'd gathered, her assessment was uncompromising. "Victoria, this is one of the most sophisticated partnership frauds I've seen," she said during our meeting in her downtown office. "Lisa Martinez has been operating essentially 2 different companies using the same facilities and resources, while systematically hiding revenue and planning an exit strategy that would leave you with nothing." The legal implications were serious enough to warrant criminal charges in addition to civil litigation. Lisa's fraud involved interstate commerce violations, tax evasion, and potentially money laundering if the undisclosed revenue streams involved cash transactions that weren't properly reported to federal authorities. But Patricia also warned me that confronting Lisa directly could be dangerous if she felt cornered and desperate to protect her scheme. People who were sophisticated enough to commit elaborate financial fraud were often prepared to escalate their deception in ways that could become personally threatening to the victims who discovered their activities. "We need to approach this strategically," Patricia advised. "If Lisa realizes that you've uncovered her fraud before we have all the evidence we need for prosecution, she might try to destroy records, transfer assets, or even make false accusations against you to muddy the legal waters." Together, we developed a plan that would allow me to gather additional evidence while giving Lisa enough rope to hang herself through her own continued deception. The strategy required me to maintain the facade of being an oblivious partner, while secretly documenting everything she did to further her fraud. But what none of us anticipated was that Lisa was already aware of my investigation, and was implementing a counter-strategy designed to neutralize me as a threat to her plans. The warning signs that Lisa knew about my investigation began appearing immediately after my meeting with Patricia Kim. Suddenly, my access to certain business records became complicated by technical difficulties and scheduling conflicts. Lisa would apologize for delays in providing documentation, explaining that the spa's accountant was updating systems or that financial reports were temporarily unavailable due to software upgrades. Her behavior during our personal interactions also shifted in subtle ways that might have been undetectable if I hadn't been specifically looking for signs of deception. Lisa became more talkative during our massage sessions, asking detailed questions about my other business activities, my travel schedule, and my relationships with other entrepreneurs in the Seattle area. The questions felt casual and conversational, but I began to realize that she was gathering intelligence about my activities and resources, possibly to anticipate how I might respond if I discovered her fraud. She seemed particularly interested in understanding my financial situation, my legal advisors, and my connections within the local business community. Most concerning was her increased attention to my schedule and availability. Lisa would suggest additional massage sessions, offering special discounts or new treatment modalities that would require extended appointments. She'd propose weekend wellness retreats, and even a collaborative trip to California to visit other spa facilities that could inspire future expansion plans. At first, I interpreted this attention as evidence that she was feeling guilty about the canceled appointments, and was trying to rebuild our professional relationship. But I began to suspect that she was actually trying to control my schedule and location, possibly to prevent me from conducting surveillance or gathering evidence that could expose her activities. The most alarming development was her sudden interest in my personal security and safety protocols. During one massage session, Lisa mentioned that she'd heard about some break-ins in my neighborhood and suggested that I consider upgrading my home security system. She recommended a specific company that specialized in protection for high-net-worth individuals, offering to make introductions that could help me assess my current vulnerabilities. Her concern seemed thoughtful and caring, but it felt wrong coming from someone who was actively defrauding me of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why would Lisa be worried about my physical safety unless she was planning something that might put me at risk? When I researched the security company she'd recommended, I discovered that it was owned by associates of James Morrison, the real estate developer who was planning to acquire the spa. Lisa was essentially trying to connect me with people who were involved in the conspiracy to steal my investment, possibly to gather information about my personal habits and security arrangements. The realization that Lisa was coordinating with other people to monitor and potentially control my activities sent chills through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in her treatment room. This wasn't just financial fraud. It was a coordinated effort that involved multiple parties and seemed designed to neutralize me as a threat to their plans. But the most disturbing conversation happened during what would turn out to be my final massage appointment at Serenity Springs. Lisa began talking about partnership restructuring and the possibility of bringing in new investors who could fund more ambitious expansion plans. "Victoria, I've been thinking about our original investment agreement," she said, while working on tension knots in my shoulders that had become increasingly severe as the stress of her deception mounted. "When we set up the partnership structure, we were both thinking smaller. One additional location, maybe some expanded services. But the opportunities that are presenting themselves now are so much bigger than anything we originally envisioned." Her tone was casual and conversational, but I could hear the underlying agenda. Lisa was preparing to propose changes to our partnership that would reduce my ownership stake while increasing her control and profits. She was setting up a conversation about restructuring that would be presented as beneficial for both of us, while actually designed to push me out of the business I'd funded. "What kind of restructuring?" I asked, though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. "Well, the new investors I've been talking with have experience scaling wellness businesses in ways that individual operators like us could never achieve alone," Lisa said, her hands continuing their therapeutic work, while her voice took on the enthusiastic tone of someone presenting an incredible opportunity. "They're talking about converting Serenity Springs into a destination wellness resort with multiple revenue streams, spa services, fitness facilities, luxury accommodations, conference facilities, even retail operations." It was exactly what James Morrison had been planning, presented as if it was Lisa's own innovative idea, rather than part of a coordinated scheme to convert the spa into a profitable entertainment complex. She was testing whether I would be receptive to dramatic changes in the business model, or whether I would resist in ways that would require them to use more aggressive tactics to achieve their goals. "That sounds like a completely different business than what we originally discussed," I said carefully, trying to gauge how far she was willing to go with this deception. "Different, yes, but so much more profitable and impactful," Lisa replied with growing enthusiasm. "Victoria, we could be looking at 10 times our current revenue within 2 years. The initial investment requirements would be substantial, but the returns would justify restructuring our ownership percentages to reflect the new capital contributions." There it was, the proposal to dilute my ownership stake in the business I'd originally funded. Lisa was offering me the opportunity to invest additional money for a smaller percentage of a business that would no longer serve any of the purposes I'd originally supported. It was sophisticated theft disguised as an exciting business opportunity. But what made the proposal particularly insulting was her assumption that I would be grateful for the chance to fund my own displacement. Lisa was presenting the destruction of our original vision as if it was an upgrade that any rational investor would embrace enthusiastically. I managed to respond with appropriate interest in questions, playing the role of a partner who was intrigued by the possibilities while secretly documenting every detail of her pitch for my attorney. But internally, I was calculating exactly how devastating the legal and financial consequences would be when Lisa discovered that she'd been systematically defrauding someone who had the resources and determination to fight back with everything she had. The massage session ended with Lisa's excitement reaching almost manic levels as she described the networking events, celebrity endorsements, and social media opportunities that would come with partnering with Morrison's development group. She was so convinced of her own brilliance that she didn't seem to notice my lack of genuine enthusiasm or the careful way I was documenting our conversation. As I left the spa that day, I knew it would be the last time I walked through those doors as a client. The next time I entered Serenity Springs, it would be with attorneys, law enforcement, and documentation that would expose every aspect of Lisa's fraud and ensure that she faced consequences for every dollar she'd stolen and every trust she'd violated. But I also suspected that Lisa was preparing her own final moves in whatever game she thought we were playing. Her eagerness to restructure our partnership and her coordination with Morrison's group suggested that they were planning to force the business transformation, whether I agreed to participate or not. What I didn't realize was that they were already implementing a strategy designed to eliminate me as an obstacle to their plans, a strategy that would make the canceled celebrity appointments seem like minor inconveniences compared to what they were actually prepared to do. The confrontation that would determine the fate of Serenity Springs and expose the full scope of Lisa's betrayal was scheduled for the following Friday. I'd requested a comprehensive business meeting to discuss the partnership restructuring proposal, telling Lisa that I needed to review all financial documentation and expansion plans before making any decisions about additional investments. Lisa had seemed pleased by my request for a formal meeting, interpreting it as evidence that I was taking her restructuring proposal seriously. She'd scheduled the meeting for after normal business hours at the downtown spa location, explaining that we needed privacy and uninterrupted time to review complex financial projections and partnership agreements. But I was also bringing Patricia Kim and a forensic accountant who specialized in partnership fraud investigations. My plan was to present Lisa with evidence of her unauthorized activities and give her one opportunity to explain the discrepancies before initiating criminal charges and civil litigation. But if we expand into event hosting, corporate wellness packages, and premium membership services, we can generate revenue 24 hours a day instead of just during normal business hours. The presentation was professionally prepared and persuasively argued, but it completely ignored the fact that these changes would transform Serenity Springs into a business that bore no resemblance to the therapeutic facility I'd invested in. Lisa was proposing to abandon everything that had made the spa special: the focus on authentic healing, the commitment to therapeutic excellence, the culture of genuine care for clients' well-being. When I asked about the financial details of how this transformation would be funded and managed, Lisa's answers became increasingly evasive. She mentioned investor commitments and development partnerships without providing specific information about terms, timelines, or the impact on existing ownership structures. The important thing is that we're positioned to take advantage of opportunities that most spa owners never get access to, she said, avoiding my direct questions about partnership percentages and profit distributions. Victoria, we could be looking at personal income in the millions instead of the thousands. Isn't that worth some flexibility about operational details? That's when I realized that Lisa had no intention of being honest about her unauthorized activities or her plans to restructure the business without my consent. She was trying to manipulate me into accepting changes that would benefit her while reducing my ownership and control, just as she'd been manipulating me for months with celebrity appointment cancellations and hidden business activities. It was time to stop playing games and reveal exactly what I'd discovered about her systematic deception. Lisa, I said, setting down the financial projections and looking directly into her eyes. Before we discuss any restructuring, I need you to explain some discrepancies I've found in our current financial records. I pulled out my own documentation, bank statements, expense reports, and evidence of the unauthorized social events that had been generating unreported revenue. Lisa's confident expression flickered for just a moment before she recovered her professional composure. I'm not sure what you mean by discrepancies, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier enthusiasm. All of our financial reporting has been handled according to standard business practices, including the $400,000 in undisclosed expenses and the separate bank account that you opened without partner consent, I asked, presenting copies of the financial evidence I'd gathered. Lisa's face went pale as she realized the scope of what I'd discovered. The woman who had been confidently presenting expansion plans just moments earlier was now calculating how much legal trouble she was facing and how she could minimize the consequences of her systematic fraud. Victoria, I think there's been a misunderstanding about some of the business development activities we've been pursuing, she said, her tone shifting to the careful neutrality of someone who was trying to avoid admitting criminal activity. Some of the events and partnerships I've been exploring required initial investments that will be reimbursed through future revenue streams. It was exactly the kind of non-explanation I'd expected, vague references to business development and future reimbursements that didn't address the fundamental issue of unauthorized spending and hidden activities. Lisa was still trying to control the narrative, presenting her fraud as legitimate business activity that I simply didn't understand. But I was no longer the trusting partner who could be manipulated through confident presentations and professional jargon. I'd spent weeks documenting her deception, and I was prepared to follow the evidence wherever it led. Lisa, I know about the exclusive social events, the payments to James Morrison's associates, and the plans to convert Serenity Springs into an entertainment venue, I said, watching her carefully for signs of how she would respond to being completely exposed. I also know about the undisclosed revenue streams and the unauthorized use of spa resources for activities that have nothing to do with therapeutic massage. The transformation in Lisa's demeanor was immediate and complete. The warm, professional woman who had been presenting expansion opportunities disappeared, replaced by someone who was calculating exactly how much damage I could do to her carefully constructed scheme. Victoria, I think you're misinterpreting some complex business activities, she said, but her voice now carried an edge of desperation that hadn't been there moments earlier. The wellness industry is evolving rapidly, and businesses that don't adapt to new opportunities get left behind. Everything I've been doing has been designed to protect and grow our investment. Her attempt to reframe theft as protection was so audacious that it was almost impressive. Lisa was trying to convince me that stealing my money and lying about business operations was actually a form of fiduciary responsibility, as if fraud was just innovative business strategy that I was too conservative to appreciate. That's when I told her about Patricia Kim and the forensic accountant who had been documenting her criminal activities for potential prosecution. Lisa's confident facade cracked completely as she realized that I hadn't just discovered her deception. I'd been building a legal case that could result in serious criminal charges and civil penalties. You hired investigators? She asked, and for the first time in our conversation, her voice reflected genuine fear. Victoria, that seems like a pretty extreme response to what amounts to a business disagreement about expansion strategies. The attempt to minimize her fraud as a simple disagreement was the final straw. Lisa had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, violated her fiduciary duties as a partner, and systematically lied about business operations for over a year. Now she was trying to present my investigation as an overreaction to legitimate business activities. But I was about to discover that Lisa's desperation made her far more dangerous than I'd anticipated. When people who have been living elaborate lies face exposure, they sometimes choose escalation over accountability. And Lisa Martinez was about to demonstrate just how far she was willing to go to protect the criminal enterprise she'd built with my stolen investment. The evening that would expose the full scope of Lisa's betrayal and test everything I thought I knew about survival and justice began with her attempt to convince me that we could resolve our differences through negotiation rather than litigation. Her tone became pleading, almost desperate, as she realized that I had evidence that could destroy her personally and professionally. Victoria, please, let's think about this rationally, she said, leaning forward across her desk with the intensity of someone fighting for her life. You're right that I should have been more transparent about some of the business development activities, But everything I've done has been focused on growing our investment. If we involve attorneys and investigators, we'll both lose everything we've built together. Her attempt to frame our situation as a mutual problem that required collaborative solutions was manipulative in the extreme. Lisa had committed systematic fraud against me for over a year, and now she was suggesting that my efforts to seek justice were equally destructive to our shared interests. Lisa, you've stolen nearly $500,000 from partnership funds and operated unauthorized business activities for months, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the rage building inside me. This isn't a business disagreement that can be resolved through negotiation. This is criminal fraud that requires accountability and restitution. That's when Lisa's demeanor shifted again, this time towards something that felt genuinely threatening. The pleading tone disappeared, replaced by a calculating coldness that I'd never seen during our 2 years of working together. Victoria, I think you're underestimating how complicated this situation could become if you insist on involving outside parties, she said, her voice taking on the measured quality of someone delivering a carefully prepared threat. Business partnerships can be messy when they dissolve, especially when one partner has been making accusations that could damage reputations and destroy relationships throughout the industry. The implication was clear. If I pursued legal action against her, Lisa would retaliate by spreading false information about me within the Seattle business community. She was threatening to destroy my reputation and business relationships unless I accepted her theft and allowed her to continue operating fraudulently. But Lisa had made a crucial miscalculation in threatening me. I'd built my tech company by outmaneuvering competitors who had more resources and more experience than I did. I'd survived hostile takeover attempts, patent litigation, and multiple efforts by larger companies to steal my intellectual property and market position. If she thought professional threats would intimidate me into accepting her fraud, she was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. Lisa, I think this conversation has gone as far as it can go productively, I said, standing up and gathering my documentation. My attorney will be in touch about the criminal referral and civil litigation we'll be filing on Monday. That's when Lisa revealed the full scope of her desperation and the lengths she was prepared to go to protect her criminal enterprise. Victoria, I really don't think you want to leave here tonight with this kind of misunderstanding between us, she said, moving to block my access to the office door. There are some things about your own business activities that you might not want to become public during a legal investigation. The threat was vague but unmistakably menacing. Lisa was suggesting that she had information about me that could be used as leverage if I refused to accept her fraud quietly. The implication was that she'd been gathering intelligence about my personal and professional life, possibly to use as blackmail material if I ever threatened her scheme. What are you talking about? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect that Lisa's interest in my schedule and security arrangements hadn't been as innocent as I'd assumed. Tax optimization strategies, relationship with certain business partners, investment decisions that might not look great under scrutiny from federal investigators, Lisa said, listing generic accusations that could apply to any successful entrepreneur. Business litigation has a way of expanding beyond the original complaints, and sometimes the person who starts the fight ends up regretting the attention it brings to their own activities. Her threats were based on the assumption that I must have something to hide, some vulnerability that could be exploited if she applied enough pressure. But Lisa had chosen the wrong target for intimidation tactics. My business practices were impeccable, specifically because I'd always known that success made you a target for people who would try to find weaknesses they could exploit. Lisa, I'm not interested in your threats or your attempts to avoid accountability for stealing my money, I said, moving toward the door despite her attempt to block my exit. This conversation is over, and my attorney will handle all future communication. That's when Lisa made the mistake that would transform her situation from criminal fraud to charges that could result in decades in federal prison. I don't think you understand how serious this situation is, she said, pulling out her phone and making a call to someone whose identity she didn't bother to conceal. James, she's not going to be reasonable about this. We need to implement the backup plan we discussed. James Morrison answered immediately, suggesting he'd been waiting for this call. Are you certain she won't cooperate? His voice carried clearly through the phone's speaker. Once we move to containment, there's no going back to negotiation. She's threatening criminal charges and federal investigation. Lisa replied, looking directly at me with an expression that was no longer hiding her desperation. Victoria seems to think she can destroy everything we've built, just because she doesn't understand the bigger picture. Understood, Morrison replied. Keep her there until we can arrange transportation. This is exactly the kind of situation we prepared contingencies for. The conversation ended, and Lisa set her phone down with the calm efficiency of someone who had crossed a line she'd been approaching for months. Whatever backup plan she and Morrison had discussed, it involved preventing me from leaving the spa and implementing some form of containment that would keep me from contacting law enforcement. Victoria, I really wish you'd been more reasonable about this, Lisa said, moving to lock the office door behind her. But since you've decided to threaten everything we've worked for, we're going to have to handle this situation differently. I was trapped in a locked office with someone who had just coordinated my detention with a business partner who was planning to steal millions of dollars from the spa I'd funded. The massage therapist who had been providing therapeutic healing for 2 years had revealed herself to be someone capable of kidnapping to protect her criminal enterprise. But Lisa had made the same mistake that had destroyed every other person who had tried to intimidate me over the years. She'd assumed that because I was willing to trust and collaborate, I was also helpless and unprepared for betrayal. What she didn't know was that my experience building a tech company in a hostile industry had taught me to prepare for exactly these kinds of situations. The smartphone in my purse wasn't just for communication. It was equipped with security applications that could alert law enforcement and document crimes in progress. The silent alarm system I'd activated when Lisa first blocked the door was already transmitting my location and audio recordings to a monitoring service that specialized in executive protection. Within minutes, my attorney would receive alerts about a potential emergency situation, and law enforcement would be coordinating a response to what was being classified as a kidnapping in progress. Lisa Martinez had tried to steal my money, destroy my investment, and now detain me against my will to prevent me from seeking justice. But she was about to learn that underestimating Victoria Chen was the most expensive mistake anyone could make in the Seattle business community. As I heard vehicles approaching the spa parking lot and realized that Morrison's associates had arrived to implement whatever containment plan they'd prepared, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the early days of building my tech company. The cold, focused determination that came from fighting for survival against people who had seriously underestimated their opponent. The sound of car doors slamming and multiple voices coordinating outside the spa windows told me that Lisa and Morrison's backup plan involved more people than just the two of them. Whatever they were planning to do to prevent me from exposing their fraud, they'd prepared for it, with the kind of resources and coordination that suggested this wasn't their first time eliminating inconvenient business partners. But they'd also made a crucial mistake that would ensure their plan failed catastrophically. In their eagerness to contain the situation quickly, they'd triggered the executive protection protocols that would bring federal law enforcement into what might otherwise have been handled as a local business dispute. My silent alarm wasn't just alerting private security, it was generating automatic notifications to FBI agents who specialized in corporate kidnapping and interstate business crimes. Lisa and Morrison's attempt to eliminate me as a threat to their fraud was about to make them the subjects of a federal investigation that would expose every aspect of their criminal enterprise. As footsteps approached the office door and I heard Lisa's voice coordinating with the people Morrison had sent to deal with me, I realized that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of my investment in Serenity Springs, but whether I would survive to see justice done. But I'd survived every challenge that had ever been thrown at me by being smarter, more prepared, and more determined than the people who tried to destroy me. Lisa Martinez and James Morrison were about to discover that they'd chosen to target someone who had built her entire career on turning other people's attacks into opportunities for devastating counterstrikes. The office door opened and 3 men in business suits entered with the professional efficiency of people who had done this before. Their presence transformed the spa's peaceful healing environment into something that felt like a crime scene, which was exactly what it was about to become. Ms. Chen, the tallest of the 3 men said with polite formality, "We're going to need you to come with us to resolve some business matters that require immediate attention." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, calculating distances to potential exits and remembering everything I'd learned about surviving corporate intimidation tactics. "If you have business matters to discuss, we can do that through appropriate legal channels with my attorney present." I'm afraid the situation has become too urgent for conventional business processes. The man continued, his tone remaining polite but carrying an unmistakable threat. Ms. Martinez has explained that you've been making some serious accusations that could damage multiple business relationships. We need to address these concerns before they escalate into legal problems that could hurt everyone involved. The attempt to frame kidnapping as conflict resolution was almost comically inadequate, but I realized that these men probably weren't professional criminals. They were likely associates of Morrison's development company who had been told this was a legitimate business dispute that required firm handling rather than criminal activity that could result in federal charges. Their misunderstanding of the legal situation they were creating would work to my advantage when law enforcement arrived, but it also made them potentially more dangerous in the short term. People who didn't understand the full implications of their actions might be willing to escalate in ways that career criminals would avoid. The accusations I've made are supported by documented evidence of financial fraud, I said, hoping to make them understand the seriousness of what they were participating in. Detaining me against my will isn't going to resolve business disputes. It's going to create federal criminal charges for everyone involved in this situation. Lisa stepped forward with the kind of desperate authority of someone trying to regain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond her management. Victoria, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We just need some time to work through these misunderstandings without outside interference. Lisa Martinez, the massage therapist who had canceled my appointments for a non-existent celebrity client, was about to discover that the quiet client she'd been systematically defrauding was someone with the resources and determination to ensure that justice was served completely and permanently. The rescue operation that liberated me from Lisa's office happened with the kind of professional efficiency that made me grateful for every dollar I'd spent on executive protection services over the years. FBI agents and Seattle police officers moved through the spa facility with tactical precision, securing all exits and ensuring that Lisa and Morrison's associates had no opportunity to escape or destroy evidence. Detective Sarah Kim from the Seattle Police Department's white-collar crime unit took my initial statement, while federal agents began the process of seizing business records, computer systems, and financial documentation that would be used to build comprehensive criminal cases against everyone involved in the fraud conspiracy. Ms. Chen, are you injured? Detective Kim asked as paramedics checked my vital signs and documented any evidence of physical restraint or psychological coercion. I'm fine, I replied, though the emotional impact of discovering that someone I'd trusted and considered a friend had been systematically stealing from me was still settling into my consciousness. But I have extensive documentation of financial fraud and unauthorized business activities that you'll want to review. The evidence I'd gathered over the previous weeks became the foundation for an investigation that would ultimately expose fraud schemes involving multiple businesses and dozens of victims across the Pacific Northwest. Lisa's operation at Serenity Springs was just one part of a larger network of wellness industry fraud that Morrison's development company had been operating for years. Federal investigators discovered that Morrison specialized in targeting successful women entrepreneurs who had built businesses in industries where trust and personal relationships were central to operations. His associates would infiltrate these businesses through employment or romantic relationships, gathering intelligence about financial operations, and then orchestrating schemes to transfer ownership to development companies that Morrison controlled. Lisa Martinez had been recruited into this network specifically to target me after Morrison's research identified me as a vulnerable, wealthy woman who had made large investments in businesses run by people I trusted personally. Her massage therapy credentials and therapeutic skills were legitimate, but her entire relationship with me had been constructed as part of a sophisticated financial fraud operation. The investigation revealed that the celebrity client who had been disrupting my appointments had never existed. The exclusive social events I'd witnessed were actually cover for meetings where Morrison's associates planned their various fraud operations and coordinated the transfer of stolen assets. Even Lisa's personal friendship with me had been manufactured according to a psychological profile that Morrison's team had developed to maximize their ability to manipulate my decision-making. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was that I hadn't been their only target. Over the previous 3 years, Morrison's network had defrauded at least 12 other women entrepreneurs across Washington, Oregon, and California, stealing over $8 million through similar schemes that combined business infiltration with personal manipulation. The pattern was always the same. Identify successful women who had built businesses based on personal relationships and trust. Infiltrate those businesses through employment or romantic partnerships. Gather intelligence about financial operations and vulnerabilities. Then orchestrate takeovers that transferred control to Morrison's development companies while leaving the original entrepreneurs with nothing. Lisa's confession, provided in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealed the sophistication of their selection process. They used social media monitoring, business publication analysis, and even private investigators to identify potential targets who met specific criteria for vulnerability and profit potential. My case had been considered especially valuable because of my tech industry success and my tendency to make large investments in businesses run by people I developed personal relationships with. Morrison's team had identified me as someone who could be manipulated through her own generosity and trust, making me an ideal target for long-term financial fraud. The legal consequences for Lisa and Morrison were swift and severe. Federal prosecutors, horrified by the systematic targeting of women entrepreneurs, pursued maximum penalties that would serve as deterrents for similar schemes. Lisa received 12 years in federal prison for fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy charges. Morrison was sentenced to 25 years without parole. His development company was seized and liquidated to provide restitution for victims. But the personal transformation was more important than the legal victory. The experience had taught me that my capacity for trust and collaboration, qualities that had made me successful in the tech industry, could also be weaponized against me by people sophisticated enough to exploit them systematically. I was no longer the entrepreneur who made investment decisions based primarily on personal relationships and shared values. The woman who had been naive enough to trust Lisa Martinez completely was gone, replaced by someone who understood that authentic business partnerships required verification systems and legal protections that couldn't be circumvented through friendship and good intentions. Serenity Springs was returned to my full ownership after Lisa's criminal conviction, but I chose to close both locations rather than continue operating a business that had been contaminated by fraud and deception. Instead, I used the facilities to establish the Chen Foundation for Entrepreneur Protection, a nonprofit organization that helps other business owners recognize and defend against sophisticated fraud schemes. The massage tables where I'd once found therapeutic healing became conference spaces, where women entrepreneurs learn about financial security, legal protection, and the warning signs of manipulation that target successful people through their own values and relationships. 6 months after Lisa's sentencing, I opened a new wellness facility in downtown Seattle, but this time I maintained complete ownership and implemented security systems that would prevent any future infiltration by people with hidden agendas. The business is profitable and serves clients who genuinely need therapeutic healing, but it operates according to protocols that prioritize security and verification over trust and personal relationships. Sometimes, when I'm working late in my office overlooking Elliott Bay, I think about the woman I was before Lisa Martinez's betrayal forced me to discover resources I'd never known I possessed. She had been successful and generous, but also vulnerable in ways that could be exploited by anyone willing to weaponize friendship and professional relationships against her. The woman I became after surviving systematic fraud and attempted kidnapping is different, still committed to building meaningful businesses and supporting other entrepreneurs, but now protected by systems and knowledge that can't be corrupted through personal manipulation. Lisa had tried to steal my money and destroy my business investments by exploiting my trust and my values. Instead, she'd forced me to become someone stronger and more resilient than I'd ever imagined possible. The massage therapist who canceled my appointments for a fictional celebrity client had inadvertently taught me the most valuable lesson of my entrepreneurial career, that authentic strength comes not from avoiding betrayal, but from surviving it with the determination to ensure it never happens again. The silent partner monitoring system that documented her fraud became a symbol I implemented across all my business relationships, a reminder that some forms of protection are invisible until the moment you need them most, just like courage, just like resilience, just like the power to build something even better from the ashes of trust betrayed and justice finally served. The call that would shatter my carefully rebuilt sense of security came on a Tuesday morning 6 months after Lisa Martinez had been sentenced to federal prison. I was in my new office at the Chen Foundation, reviewing applications from entrepreneurs who needed assistance protecting their businesses from sophisticated fraud schemes, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Chen, this is Detective Maria Santos with the Portland Police Bureau. The voice was professional, but carried an urgency that immediately put me on alert. We're investigating a case that bears striking similarities to the fraud operation you exposed in Seattle. We believe some of Morrison's associates may have escaped prosecution and are continuing their operations under different identities. The news hit me like a physical blow. I'd assumed that Morrison's network had been completely dismantled when federal investigators seized his development company and arrested his known associates. The idea that sophisticated fraud operations were still targeting women entrepreneurs using methods similar to what I'd survived made my carefully constructed sense of closure feel naive and premature. What kind of similarities? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer would involve the kind of systematic manipulation and financial theft that had characterized my own experience with Lisa. Detective Santos explained that 3 women business owners in Portland had reported incidents involving massage therapists, wellness consultants, and spa managers who had gained their trust over extended periods before implementing elaborate schemes to steal their investments and take control of their businesses. The methods were nearly identical to what Morrison's network had used against me, building personal relationships, gathering financial intelligence, then orchestrating takeovers through fraudulent partnerships and investment proposals. The most recent victim is a woman named Carmen Rodriguez who built a chain of yoga studios and wellness centers throughout Oregon, Detective Santos continued. Her business partner, someone she'd known and trusted for over 3 years, disappeared last week, with nearly $2 million in studio assets and client accounts. When we started investigating, we found evidence that suggests this was part of a coordinated operation involving multiple people working together. The pattern was unmistakably familiar. Morrison's network hadn't been eliminated by his imprisonment. It had adapted and evolved, learning from the mistakes that had led to his capture, while maintaining the core strategies that made their fraud so effective. They were still targeting successful women who had built businesses based on trust and personal relationships, still using wellness industry infiltration as their primary method of gaining access to financial operations. But what made this development particularly disturbing was the implication that my own case had been studied and analyzed by other criminals who were now using my survival strategies to improve their own operations. They'd learned from Lisa's mistakes about maintaining operational security and avoiding detection, making them potentially more dangerous to future victims than the original network had been. Detective Santos requested that I travel to Portland to consult on their investigation, providing insights about fraud recognition and helping them understand the psychological profiles that made certain entrepreneurs vulnerable to these sophisticated manipulation tactics. My experience surviving Morrison's network had apparently made me one of the few people who understood how these operations worked from both victim and survival perspectives. The drive to Portland gave me time to process the emotional impact of learning that the nightmare I'd survived was continuing to play out in other women's lives. Part of me felt responsible for not doing enough to warn the broader business community about the specific methods these criminals use to infiltrate and destroy successful enterprises. The foundation I'd established was helping individual entrepreneurs protect themselves, but it wasn't providing the kind of systematic warning system that could prevent network-level fraud operations. More personally troubling was the realization that my own healing process had been based on the assumption that justice had been served and the threat had been eliminated. Learning that Morrison's associates were still operating made me feel like I was living in a temporary ceasefire rather than genuine peace, waiting for the next attack from enemies I'd thought were defeated. The Portland Police Bureau was located in a modern building downtown that reflected the city's emphasis on progressive law enforcement and community engagement. Detective Santos met me in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with the kind of direct, intelligent presence that suggested she'd built her career on solving complex cases that other investigators found too challenging. "Miss Chen, thank you for making the drive down," she said as we walked toward the elevator. "What we're dealing with here is more sophisticated than anything I've seen in 15 years of white-collar crime investigation. These people have learned how to exploit the exact qualities that make someone successful in business: trust, relationship building, the ability to see potential in other people." Her assessment matched my own understanding of why I'd been vulnerable to Lisa's manipulation. The qualities that had made me successful in the tech industry, willingness to invest in people, ability to build partnerships based on shared values, tendency to trust until given reason not to, had also made me an ideal target for systematic exploitation. The conference room where Detective Santos had assembled evidence from the Portland cases looked like a war room dedicated to understanding criminal psychology. Wall charts displayed relationship networks, financial transaction timelines, and behavioral patterns that revealed the sophisticated planning behind each fraud operation. The level of coordination and long-term strategy was even more elaborate than what I'd discovered in my own case. The woman we believe is coordinating these operations goes by several names, but we think her real identity is Alexandra Morrison, James Morrison's daughter, Detective Santos explained, pointing to surveillance photographs of a woman in her early 30s with the kind of polished, professional appearance that would make her instantly credible to potential business partners. The revelation that Morrison's criminal network was literally a family business added layers of complexity that I hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just about former associates continuing his methods. It was about his daughter carrying on a criminal legacy that had apparently been passed down through generations of sophisticated financial fraud. Alexandra Morrison had been operating in Portland for nearly 2 years, building relationships with successful women entrepreneurs through yoga classes, wellness conferences, and professional networking events. Her approach was more subtle than her father's direct business infiltration method, focusing on long-term relationship building that eventually led to investment opportunities and partnership proposals. She identifies targets through social media analysis and professional publication research, just like her father did, Detective Santos continued, showing me profiles of women who had been approached by Alexandra over the past 18 months. But she's learned to avoid the kinds of operational mistakes that led to James Morrison's capture. She uses different identities for different operations, maintains better financial documentation, and has developed legal structures that make her fraud much harder to prosecute. The evolution of their methods was both impressive and terrifying. Alexandra had studied her father's failures and her network's vulnerabilities, creating a new generation of fraud operations that were more sophisticated and potentially more devastating than anything I'd survived. But what made the Portland cases particularly disturbing was evidence that Alexandra's network was deliberately targeting women who had survived previous fraud attempts or business betrayals. They were using databases of bankruptcy filings, lawsuit records, and even victims' assistance program participation to identify entrepreneurs who might be more cautious and therefore more challenging to manipulate successfully. "We think they see women like you as premium targets," Detective Santos explained, showing me documents that suggested I'd been identified as a potential victim for Alexandra's operations. Survivors of sophisticated fraud often have more resources for legal defense, which makes successfully stealing from them a more prestigious accomplishment within criminal networks. The idea that my survival of Lisa's betrayal had actually made me a more attractive target for other criminals was deeply unsettling. I'd assumed that my experience and the security systems I'd implemented would protect me from similar schemes, but these criminals were specifically seeking out people like me because we represented more challenging and potentially more profitable opportunities. Detective Santos showed me financial records from Carmen Rodriguez's case that revealed transaction patterns nearly identical to what Lisa had used to steal from my spa investment. The methods for hiding unauthorized expenses, creating separate bank accounts, and generating unreported revenue were so similar that they had obviously been learned from detailed study of my case records. Carmen trusted her business partner because she thought she was being more careful after a previous bad investment experience, Detective Santos explained. Alexandra's associate spent months building credibility by helping Carmen implement better financial controls and security systems. The fraud was more effective because Carmen believed she was protected by lessons learned from her earlier mistakes. The psychological manipulation was even more sophisticated than what I'd experienced with Lisa. Alexandra's network was using victims' own survival strategies against them, converting hard-earned wisdom about business protection into weapons that made them more vulnerable to sophisticated attacks. As I reviewed case files from all 3 Portland victims, a pattern emerged that was both familiar and newly disturbing. Each woman had built successful businesses in industries where personal relationships and trust were central to operations: wellness services, educational consulting, community health programs. Each had survived previous business betrayals or financial setbacks that had taught them to be more cautious about partnerships and investments. And each had been targeted by Alexandra's associates, specifically because their history of survival made them more valuable victims who could provide both financial resources and psychological satisfaction to criminals who viewed successful manipulation as a form of professional accomplishment. But the most chilling discovery came when Detective Santos showed me surveillance footage of Alexandra Morrison at a wellness conference in Seattle just 3 weeks earlier. She'd been researching potential targets in my own city, possibly including entrepreneurs who were connected to my foundation, or had attended events where I'd spoken about business security and fraud prevention. "We think she may be planning something specifically targeted at you or your foundation," Detective Santos said, freeze-framing an image of Alexandra taking notes during one of my presentations about recognizing manipulation tactics in business relationships. "Her network seems to view you as both a threat to their operations and a prize target whose successful manipulation would enhance their reputation within criminal communities." The realization that I was simultaneously hunter and hunted, helping law enforcement track these criminals, while also being tracked by them as a potential victim, created a new level of complexity that I hadn't prepared for when I decided to become a public advocate for business security. I spent the rest of that day working with Detective Santos and FBI agents who had been coordinating the multi-state investigation into Alexandra Morrison's network. The scope of their operations was far larger than anyone had initially realized, spanning from California to Washington with potential connections to similar fraud networks operating throughout the country. My role evolved from consultant to active participant in a law enforcement operation designed to identify and disrupt the next generation of sophisticated business fraud that was targeting successful women entrepreneurs. The techniques I'd learned from surviving Lisa's betrayal became intelligence that helped investigators understand how these criminals selected targets, built relationships, and implemented their theft operations. But the most important contribution I could make was helping other potential victims recognize the warning signs before they became trapped in elaborate deception schemes. The foundation I'd established after surviving Morrison's network was about to become the center of a much larger effort to protect women entrepreneurs from systematic criminal targeting. The emotional impact of discovering that my ordeal was continuing to play out in other women's lives was profound. I had thought that surviving Lisa's betrayal and seeing justice served had closed that chapter of my life, allowing me to move forward with confidence and security. Learning that similar criminals were still operating, and possibly targeting me again, forced me to acknowledge that some battles never end. They just evolve into new forms that require continued vigilance and adaptation. Over the following weeks, I worked with federal investigators to develop a comprehensive profile of Alexandra Morrison's network and their methods for identifying and manipulating potential victims. The intelligence we gathered revealed fraud operations that were active in at least 12 states, targeting hundreds of women entrepreneurs who had built successful businesses in industries characterized by trust and personal relationships. The criminal network had evolved far beyond the relatively simple infiltration methods that James Morrison had used. Alexandra's operations involved sophisticated social engineering, professional identity construction, and long-term psychological manipulation that could continue for years before victims realized they were being systematically exploited. Most disturbing was evidence that the network was recruiting legitimate professionals, massage therapists, business consultants, wellness practitioners, who became unknowing participants in fraud operations by providing credible cover for criminals who needed authentic credentials to gain their victims' trust. My investigation into Alexandra Morrison's network revealed that the wellness industry had become a primary hunting ground for sophisticated financial predators who understood that businesses focused on healing and personal growth attracted entrepreneurs who were more likely to make decisions based on trust and shared values rather than purely financial calculations. The scope of this vulnerability became clear when I started receiving calls from women across the country who had recognized elements of their own experiences in the media coverage of the Portland investigation. Massage therapists who had suddenly canceled appointments for celebrity clients, business partners who had suggested restructuring investments to take advantage of exclusive opportunities, wellness consultants who had recommended security services provided by their associates. Each call revealed another piece of a national fraud network that was far more extensive than law enforcement had initially understood. Alexandra Morrison wasn't just continuing her father's work, she was expanding it into a coordinated criminal enterprise that specifically targeted successful women who had built businesses in industries where exploitation could be disguised as partnership and support. The psychological profiles that these criminals used to select their targets were remarkably sophisticated, incorporating social media analysis, financial record research, and even personality assessment techniques that allowed them to identify women who would be most vulnerable to specific types of manipulation. They looked for entrepreneurs who had overcome significant challenges to build their businesses, understanding that these women would be more likely to trust people who claimed to share their values and support their success. They targeted women who had experienced previous business betrayals, knowing that survivors often developed security measures that could be turned against them by criminals sophisticated enough to exploit their protective strategies. Most cynically, they specifically sought out women who were active in business mentorship, women's networking organizations, and entrepreneur support groups, using these platforms to identify potential victims while also gathering intelligence about their financial resources and business vulnerabilities. The realization that my own advocacy work was potentially exposing other entrepreneurs to criminal targeting forced me to completely reconsider how I approached business security education and victim support. Simply teaching people to recognize fraud wasn't sufficient when criminals were adapting their methods based on the protection strategies that potential victims were implementing. Working with federal investigators, I began developing what we called adaptive security protocols, protection systems that could evolve in response to new criminal methods rather than relying on static defensive measures that sophisticated criminals could learn to circumvent. The foundation I'd established expanded its mission from individual victim support to systematic criminal disruption, working directly with law enforcement agencies to identify and neutralize fraud networks before they could establish operations in new markets. But the most important realization was that fighting these criminals required the same kind of long-term strategic thinking and adaptive planning that they were using to target their victims. This wasn't just about surviving individual attacks. It was about building defensive systems that could protect entire industries from systematic criminal exploitation. The investigation into Alexandra Morrison's network led to discoveries that would reshape how law enforcement approached financial fraud targeting women entrepreneurs. Federal agents uncovered evidence of coordinated operations spanning the entire West Coast, involving dozens of criminals who specialized in different aspects of business infiltration and identity manipulation. Some network members focused on relationship building and psychological manipulation, spending months or even years establishing credibility with potential victims before revealing their criminal intentions. Others specialized in financial analysis and legal structure creation, designing theft mechanisms that could operate for extended periods without detection. The most sophisticated members were experts in identity construction and operational security, creating false professional histories and credentials that could withstand significant scrutiny from victims who had been educated about business fraud recognition. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was evidence that Alexandra Morrison's network had been studying law enforcement investigation methods and victim protection strategies, specifically adapting their operations to exploit weaknesses in the systems designed to prevent business fraud. They'd learned to avoid the kinds of digital communication and financial documentation that had led to her father's prosecution, using encrypted messaging systems and complex financial structures that made their operations much more difficult to investigate and prosecute. The network had also developed sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques, including methods for identifying and neutralizing victims who might be working with law enforcement to document their criminal activities. This level of criminal sophistication required law enforcement to completely reimagine their approach to business fraud investigation and prevention. Traditional methods that focused on individual cases and reactive prosecution were insufficient against criminal networks that planned their operations with the same strategic sophistication that successful businesses used for market expansion and competitive positioning. My role in the investigation evolved from victim consultant to operational asset, working directly with undercover agents who were attempting to infiltrate Alexandra Morrison's network by posing as potential victims and business partners. The experience of helping plan and implement law enforcement operations against criminals who were using methods similar to what I'd survived was both empowering and deeply unsettling. Part of me felt like I was finally achieving complete justice for Lisa's betrayal by helping to prevent similar crimes against other entrepreneurs. But another part of me struggled with the realization that my survival had been somewhat accidental. If my security systems hadn't worked as effectively as they did, or if Lisa had been more sophisticated about operational security, I might have become another unsolved disappearance, rather than a success story about business resilience and legal accountability. The undercover operation targeting Alexandra Morrison required months of careful planning and preparation. Federal agents had to create false business histories and professional identities that would be attractive to her network, while also being sophisticated enough to withstand the kind of background research that these criminals conducted before selecting their targets. My experience with Lisa's manipulation tactics provided crucial intelligence about the psychological techniques and relationship-building methods that Alexandra's associates would likely use during their infiltration attempts. Understanding how these criminals exploited trust and professional relationships allowed law enforcement to prepare responses that would encourage the criminals to reveal more of their operational methods and network connections. But the operation also required me to confront aspects of my own psychology and business decision-making that had made me vulnerable to Lisa's initial approach. Working with federal psychologists and behavioral analysts, I had to examine the specific personality traits and professional habits that sophisticated criminals could exploit to gain access to successful entrepreneurs' financial resources and business operations. The analysis revealed patterns in my thinking and behavior that were simultaneously strengths in legitimate business contexts and vulnerabilities when dealing with people who had criminal intentions. My tendency to invest quickly in people who shared my apparent values, my willingness to provide operational autonomy to trusted partners, my preference for informal relationship building over formal legal protections. All of these qualities had contributed to my business success, while also making me an ideal target for systematic exploitation. Understanding these vulnerabilities wasn't just personally valuable. It was crucial for developing protection strategies that could help other entrepreneurs maintain their collaborative and trust-based business approaches, while implementing security measures that would prevent criminal infiltration. The breakthrough in the Alexandra Morrison investigation came when one of her associates approached an undercover agent posing as a successful wellness entrepreneur who had recently received a large inheritance and was looking for investment opportunities in the health and healing industry. The initial contact followed exactly the pattern that Detective Santos and I had predicted, based on studying previous cases. Alexandra's associate, using the identity Sarah Chen, positioned herself as an experienced massage therapist and business consultant who specialized in helping entrepreneurs scale wellness businesses while maintaining their authentic healing mission. Sarah Chen's approach was sophisticated and patient, focusing on relationship building and credibility establishment before introducing any business opportunities or partnership proposals. She attended yoga classes at the gym where the undercover agent worked out, volunteered at wellness conferences that the agent participated in, and gradually built what appeared to be a genuine friendship based on shared interests and professional goals. The psychological manipulation was subtle but systematic. Sarah Chen would mention successful business partnerships she'd facilitated, share stories about entrepreneurs who had transformed their small wellness practices into national brands, and gradually introduced the idea that the agent was missing opportunities for rapid growth because she was too focused on day-to-day operations rather than strategic expansion. The process was nearly identical to how Lisa had approached me, building trust and establishing credibility before introducing concepts that would eventually lead to fraudulent investment proposals and partnership agreements designed to transfer ownership and control to criminal networks. But because the undercover agent was prepared for these tactics and had extensive law enforcement support, she was able to document every aspect of Sarah Chen's manipulation while appearing to be genuinely influenced by the attention and apparent business expertise. Over 6 months, Sarah Chen introduced the agent to other members of Alexandra Morrison's network, including business lawyers who specialized in partnership structuring, financial advisors who could help optimize tax strategies for rapid business expansion, and eventually Alexandra herself, who was presented as a successful entrepreneur who had built and sold multiple wellness businesses. Alexandra Morrison was everything I'd expected based on studying her methods: charismatic, knowledgeable about business operations, and skilled at presenting criminal fraud as innovative business strategy that conventional entrepreneurs were too conservative to embrace. Her proposal for partnering with the undercover agent was remarkably similar to what Lisa had suggested during our final confrontation. Alexandra wanted to help the agent convert her small yoga studio into a destination wellness resort that would generate revenue through multiple streams: therapeutic services, luxury accommodations, corporate retreat hosting, and exclusive membership programs. The financial projections were impressive and professionally prepared, but they were based on converting the agent's business into something completely different from its original mission, while requiring her to surrender majority ownership to investors who would provide the capital for rapid expansion. The proposal included all the elements that had characterized James Morrison's original fraud network: complex legal structures that would be difficult for victims to understand, artificial urgency about market opportunities that required quick decisions, and partnership terms that would leave the original entrepreneur with diminished control over a business that bore no resemblance to what she'd originally built. But Alexandra's presentation was more sophisticated than her father's methods had been. She understood that successful entrepreneurs who had survived previous business challenges would be more suspicious of obvious manipulation tactics, so her approach emphasized collaboration and shared decision-making while actually implementing gradual takeover strategies that would be difficult to recognize until they were nearly complete. The undercover operation documented every aspect of Alexandra Morrison's fraud methodology, providing law enforcement with evidence that could be used to dismantle her entire network and prevent similar operations from targeting other entrepreneurs. But the most valuable intelligence came from understanding how these criminals selected their targets and adapted their methods based on victims' defensive strategies. Alexandra's network had developed sophisticated profiles of different types of entrepreneurs, categorizing potential victims by their vulnerabilities and designing custom manipulation approaches that would be most effective against specific personality types and business backgrounds. The arrest operation that concluded the investigation was coordinated across multiple states simultaneously, ensuring that Alexandra Morrison and her associates couldn't escape or destroy evidence when they realized their network had been compromised. Federal agents executed search warrants at properties in Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, seizing financial records, computer systems, and communication devices that documented the full scope of criminal operations targeting women entrepreneurs throughout the West Coast. Alexandra Morrison was arrested at her Portland residence, which had been purchased with money stolen from her victims, and furnished with artwork and luxury items that had been acquired through fraudulent business transactions. The evidence seized during the arrests revealed the scope of a criminal enterprise that had defrauded over 40 women entrepreneurs across multiple states, stealing more than $12 million through systematic business infiltration and partnership fraud. But perhaps the most important outcome was documentation that would help law enforcement identify and prevent similar criminal networks from operating in other markets. The methods that Alexandra Morrison had developed represented the evolution of business fraud into a sophisticated criminal specialty that required equally sophisticated defensive strategies. My role in the investigation had evolved from victim seeking justice to consultant, helping law enforcement understand and combat a new generation of financial predators who specifically targeted successful women entrepreneurs. The experience taught me that surviving sophisticated business fraud wasn't just about individual resilience and legal accountability. It was about building defensive systems that could protect entire communities of entrepreneurs from systematic criminal exploitation. The foundation I'd established after surviving Lisa's betrayal became the center of a national effort to educate entrepreneurs about recognizing and defending against evolving fraud methods, while also working directly with law enforcement agencies to identify and disrupt criminal networks before they could establish operations in new markets. But the most important lesson was understanding that the battle against sophisticated business fraud was ongoing and required constant adaptation as criminals developed new methods for exploiting the trust and collaborative relationships that made entrepreneurial success possible. Alexandra Morrison was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Her associates received terms ranging from 8 to 20 years, and their criminal network was dismantled through coordinated prosecution efforts across multiple jurisdictions. The restitution provided to their victims helped many women entrepreneurs rebuild their businesses and implement security measures that would prevent similar exploitation in the future. But the real victory was systemic. Law enforcement agencies now had the intelligence and investigative frameworks necessary to identify and combat similar criminal networks before they could cause the kind of widespread damage that had characterized both James and Alexandra Morrison's operations. The wellness industry implemented new professional standards and verification requirements that made it much more difficult for criminals to establish false credentials and infiltrate legitimate businesses. And entrepreneurs across the country had access to education and resources that helped them maintain their collaborative and trust-based business approaches, while implementing protection strategies that could prevent criminal exploitation. Standing in my office overlooking Elliott Bay, 6 months after Alexandra Morrison's conviction, I reflected on how much my understanding of business success and personal security had evolved since that first canceled massage appointment had revealed Lisa's betrayal. I was no longer the entrepreneur who made investment decisions based primarily on personal relationships and shared values. But I also wasn't someone who had become so defensive and suspicious that I couldn't build authentic partnerships and collaborative business relationships. The woman I'd become after surviving 2 generations of sophisticated business fraud was someone who understood that true strength came from combining trust with verification, collaboration with protection, and openness with intelligent caution. The Chen Foundation had grown into a national organization that helped thousands of entrepreneurs recognize and defend against business fraud, while maintaining the qualities that made them successful: their willingness to invest in people, their ability to build partnerships based on shared values, their commitment to creating businesses that served authentic purposes. But perhaps the most important outcome was personal. I'd learned that surviving betrayal wasn't just about individual resilience. It was about building systems and communities that could protect others from similar exploitation. Lisa Martinez had tried to destroy me by exploiting my capacity for trust and collaboration. Instead, she'd forced me to discover that those qualities, properly protected, were among my greatest assets for building businesses and relationships that could withstand any challenge. The massage therapist who had canceled my appointments for a fictional celebrity client had inadvertently taught me that authentic success came not from avoiding betrayal, but from surviving it, with the determination to ensure that others would be protected from similar exploitation. The silent partner monitoring systems that had saved my business and possibly my life had evolved into comprehensive protection strategies that were now helping entrepreneurs across the country build successful businesses without becoming vulnerable to the kind of sophisticated criminal networks that had targeted both me and dozens of other women. Sometimes, late at night when I was reviewing Foundation case files or consulting with law enforcement agencies about emerging fraud patterns, I would think about all the women entrepreneurs who were building successful businesses based on trust and collaboration, unaware that sophisticated criminals might be studying them as potential targets. But I also knew that the systems we'd built and the intelligence we'd gathered were making it increasingly difficult for these criminals to operate successfully. Each fraud network we disrupted, each criminal we helped prosecute, each entrepreneur we educated about protection strategies, all of it contributed to a safer business environment where women could build successful enterprises without becoming vulnerable to systematic exploitation. The fight against sophisticated business fraud would never be completely finished, but we transformed it from individual survival stories into systematic defense strategies that could protect entire communities of entrepreneurs. And in that transformation, I'd found a purpose that was more meaningful than any business success I'd achieved before, using my experience surviving betrayal to ensure that other women could build successful businesses without fear of the kind of criminal exploitation that had once threatened to destroy everything I'd worked to create. The transformation was complete on a crisp autumn morning 2 years later, as I watched the final construction crews putting finishing touches on the Chen Foundation's new headquarters in downtown Seattle. The building that would house our National Fraud Prevention Center stood where Serenity Springs' original location had once operated. A deliberate choice that turned the site of my betrayal into a monument to protection and justice. The irony wasn't lost on me that the massage tables where Lisa Martinez had systematically planned my financial destruction had been replaced by conference rooms where entrepreneurs from across the country now learned to recognize and defend against the exact types of manipulation I'd survived. What had once been a place of deception had become a fortress of education and empowerment. My phone buzzed with a text message that brought everything full circle. It was from Carmen Rodriguez, the Portland entrepreneur whose case had led me to discover Alexandra Morrison's network. She was opening her 4th yoga studio next month and wanted to thank me for the security protocols that had prevented another infiltration attempt just weeks earlier. The message included a photo of her ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by staff members and community supporters who had helped her rebuild after the fraud that had nearly destroyed her business. Her smile was radiant with the kind of confidence that comes from surviving betrayal and emerging stronger than ever before. Similar messages arrived daily from entrepreneurs across the country who had implemented the protection strategies we'd developed through hard-won experience and federal investigation insights. Each success story represented another woman who would never have to endure the kind of systematic exploitation that had characterized my own journey. From naive investor to seasoned fraud fighter, the Chen Foundation had processed over 1,500 cases in its first 2 years of operation, helping entrepreneurs identify potential threats, implement security measures, and coordinate with law enforcement when criminal activity was suspected. Our success rate in preventing completed fraud operations had exceeded 90%, largely because we understood criminal psychology from the perspective of people who had survived their most sophisticated attacks. But the real measure of our impact wasn't statistical, it was cultural. The wellness and entrepreneurship communities had developed new standards for partnership verification, investment documentation, and operational transparency that made systematic fraud significantly more difficult to implement successfully. Professional licensing boards had strengthened requirements for credential verification, making it much harder for criminals to establish false identities within industries that depended on trust and personal relationships. Business schools were incorporating fraud recognition and prevention into their entrepreneurship curricula, ensuring that future business leaders would understand these threats before they became vulnerable to them. Most importantly, women entrepreneurs were no longer isolated in their experiences of business betrayal and financial exploitation. The support networks we'd helped establish provided both practical resources for protection and emotional support for those who had survived attacks on their businesses and personal trust. Standing in my new office, I could see Elliott Bay stretching toward the horizon, the same view that had witnessed my transformation from victim to survivor to protector. The water looked different now, not like a boundary that separated me from unknown threats, but like a pathway that connected me to communities of entrepreneurs who were building successful businesses with confidence and security. The final vindication came in an unexpected form. I received a letter from federal prison, postmarked from the facility where Lisa Martinez was serving her sentence. The envelope contained a single page of handwritten text that I almost threw away without reading, assuming it would be another attempt at manipulation or self-justification. But curiosity overcame caution, and I found myself reading words that I'd never expected from the woman who had systematically betrayed my trust and stolen my money while pretending to be my friend and business partner. Victoria, I know you have no reason to believe anything I write, but I wanted you to know that what you built after surviving what I did to you has probably saved more lives than you realize. The other women in here, who were involved in similar schemes, tell stories about operations that failed because potential victims had learned to recognize the warning signs you've been teaching. I destroyed your trust and nearly destroyed your business, but you turned that destruction into protection for hundreds of other people. I can't undo what I did, but I'm grateful that you found a way to make something meaningful from the damage I caused. The letter was signed simply LM, without any attempt to claim friendship or ask for forgiveness. It felt like the final acknowledgement that the professional relationship and personal connection I'd thought we shared had been completely fabricated, but also like recognition that my response to her betrayal had created something more valuable than anything she'd tried to steal. I kept the letter in my desk drawer, not as a memento of forgiveness, but as a reminder that the most profound victories sometimes come from transforming other people's attacks into opportunities for building stronger defenses and more meaningful purposes. The Chen Foundation's work would continue evolving as criminals developed new methods and entrepreneurs faced new challenges, but the core mission would remain unchanged. ensuring that the qualities that made people successful in business, trust, collaboration, willingness to invest in relationships, could be preserved and protected rather than exploited and destroyed. As I locked my office that evening and walked toward the parking garage, I passed the memorial plaque we'd installed near the building's entrance. It read simply, "In honor of trust rebuilt and strength discovered. For everyone who has survived what they never thought they could survive." The massage therapist who had canceled my appointment for a fictional celebrity client had tried to destroy me by exploiting the very qualities that made me successful. Instead, she'd forced me to discover that those qualities, properly protected and intelligently applied, were the foundation for building something far more meaningful than any business success I'd achieved before. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, and new opportunities to help entrepreneurs build successful businesses without becoming vulnerable to the kind of sophisticated exploitation that had once threatened to destroy everything I'd worked to create. The fight against business fraud would never be completely finished, but we'd transformed it from individual survival stories into systematic protection that could safeguard entire communities of entrepreneurs. The woman who had been naive enough to trust Lisa Martinez completely was gone, replaced by someone who understood that authentic strength came from combining wisdom with vigilance, collaboration with verification, and openness with intelligent protection. The canceled massage appointment that had seemed like a minor inconvenience had become the catalyst for building defenses that would protect generations of entrepreneurs from systematic criminal exploitation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.